Welcome back to my Colorado Mountain Garden and Homestead, and more fun with props. So I'm not going to go too much into like if you're covering your beds that are just outside. This is going to be more geared towards those people who have greenhouses and hoop houses, but I'm sure we'll touch base back and forth as I go along on the other. And this is all about keeping your hoop house or greenhouses cooler. Now, keep in mind, I have no electricity whatsoever going to my greenhouses or my hoop house. If I need electricity up there for some reason, I have to run a huge long extension cord from an outlet. So, I'm using this little lid cover here. So, as far as UV protection, shade, whatever, if you have built or you bought a house with a greenhouse that is very clear. Now, the cloudiness you see on this is just because it covers plants and gets scratched and everything like that. If it's clear like this, there's probably zero UV protection. Same thing with a glass greenhouse. Now, you may have one that has tinted windows or tinted glass, so you get some. But for the most part, glass is going to be hotter than plastic. Most greenhouses come nowadays, if they're the poly panels, they do have UV protection, and that helps with your plants not burning up, but it really does not help with the heat. And I'm going to use the example of how my greenhouses and hoop house is set up at my house, which my property is mostly east-west. On the east side, which is here, so I put north, east, south, and west. The sun has to come up above the hill behind us where the house is built above us, but it's on a hill before it really starts hitting any of my greenhouses or my hoop house. If you are totally south facing, there's no trees, no nothing blocking anything off. So I have to the south, which is up here, it's a ways away from the greenhouse and hoop house, but I have trees. Okay, same thing with north, and even in front of my little greenhouse, we have trees in that area. So I get some protection from the pine trees. So, knowing that the sun rises in the east and comes around and over, for me, I'm going to get my most intense heat starting, and this depends on the time of the year. Like right now, things really don't start heating up here till about 1:30. As we're in July and August and everything like that, it's a little bit more. So when I use shade cloth, and I'm using my handy paper towel here, be it hoop or greenhouse, I cover basically from the top and then down the side. If you are total south facing, you may have to do the top and down the sides, the entire top. Okay? So it's part of knowing what your microclimate is and everything like that. I recommend that everybody buy, for however many greenhouses or hoop houses you have, purchased a digital thermometer that you can track and see what it is at least throughout a 24-hour period. Now, I have a weather station and I have temperature probes in all of mine. So, I can see it for a day, a month, whatever, because it changes on the grids. So I'm going to talk about the greenhouses first. My little greenhouse is a cheap little Harbor Freight greenhouse. Okay, I think it's 6x8. It has 2 vents, one here and one here, and they open up. They open up in the air like this. So when it's cooler out, or if it's cold at night and I'm just trying to get things going, those may have been open during the day, but at night I close them down. Both of my greenhouses only have a door on the north end. Okay. The big greenhouse has 4 vents. It has a vent here, a vent here, a vent back here, and here. Again, they open up to let the heat out, but then I can close them down whenever I want. Now, I don't use the beeswax stuff anymore, mostly because they rarely last more than 2 years. And if we're getting really bad winds during the day, even if it's hot, I might want to close those vents at least partially down, if not all the way, because you don't want them to rip off or anything like that. For the big greenhouse, I also have 2 solar solar fans on the top. Okay. Nothing else. Again, the other one's just a Harbor Freight cheap thing. So, be it my greenhouses or my hoop house, when I just usually, probably within mid-May, everything's going to be set. So, I will have my shade cloth up. It'll be from whatever the peak is. Now the hoop house is rounded, but I have wood supports and cattle panels going over. So the shade cloth is hooked at the top about midway. There are those people that will say, put your shade cloth on the outside. And I'm not a believer of that. One, keep in mind my greenhouses have vents that open up. My big greenhouse has solar fans. So I have to get as much sun and as big of an opening. So if I covered the outside with the shade cloth, it's not going to work. Yeah, I'm just, I'd have to cut out and try and do too much. So I don't know if we're going to be able to see this very well, but I'm going to do my best. So everything is inside. You get the idea. Although I'm going to show you on the outside. Now, towards the end of the day, depending on the time of the year, my house shades both of my greenhouses to some extent, except for the very ends of it. And, if you think that my small greenhouse is about here, my big greenhouse sticks out past it. So I start getting cooling, I should say, earlier on the greenhouses. The hoop house is totally exposed. Basically, there's no trees right on top of it. So as soon as the sun gets up over that east side, it has, if it's sunny out, it has sun the rest of the day. The most intense, sometimes it starts at 11 earlier in the year and later in the year. Then it goes down, it might be 12, 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. So I cover the inside of my greenhouses and my hoop house with 50% shade cloth. Now, the hoop house, the ends are both open. And it sits up on a wood frame about 2.5 feet tall. And there's small, like, I'll say windows. And that's just covered with screening to let the air come in through the bottom. The greenhouses are the poly panels from all the way down the wall. No openings. The only opening is my door. I use 50% shade cloth, and it doesn't say that on here, but this is just one of the ones that I haven't opened up yet. They didn't used to have the ones that are hemmed and have grommets in them, the shade cloth. It used to just be like kind of fringed a little bit. There might have been a little bit of hemming, but not much. So however big this is, let's say it's 8 by 6. I don't know, because it doesn't say on the outside of the package. It has the thick hem here. I'm going to bring it in. This thicker hem all the way around the outside. And then it has grommets every so many feet. And again, you can go look at it on Amazon. They usually have better pictures, and then decide what you want to do. This is just some type of plastic material. And for like 50% shade cloth, it just has more layers. So if you buy 20%, it has nothing. And I don't recommend that you buy 20%. Anywhere. I don't care where you live. I use 50%. And if you are totally south facing, you may want to use something way more intense along the top. Let's say 80%, and then something not so much on the sides. To me, it's not worth switching it out or whatever. Worst case scenario, if you have a spot that seems to be hotter than the other, you can always double up on the 50%. I started with 40% and still found that the heat inside of the greenhouses was just too intense because I don't have as much airflow versus my hoop house where both ends are open. The way I hook mine up, our hoop house we built, it's basically a wood frame, so it sits up, and then we put cattle panels over the top, and then the greenhouse plastic over that. So there's no vents at the top. So everything has to come end to end. Or, like I said, it's raised up on top of a wood frame, and I have the windows. No, it's not even a window. It's just a screened opening so that the critters don't get in. There's doors on both ends. They're just screen doors. Those are open all the time, even during the winter. The lower part of the ends, so if you think of this as a hoop house, it's round. The lower part has Hardware cloth, just regular hardware cloth, not the kind that's got the vinyl coating on it. And then up top, in the larger area, I think it's chicken wire. Might be a different kind of wire, I don't remember. But that's so I can let the pollinators in, keep the critters out, let the pollinators in up higher. Screen door, it's just screen. Think of a screen door, it's just screen. They don't have glass in them. They don't open and close, they're just screening. So what happens up here, especially, you got to figure we're at 8,800 feet. Some of you may be higher, some of you may be lower. But anyway you look at it, Colorado has very intense sun. That's why you sunburn quickly. We're closer to the sun. So even if it's a cooler day, that UV protection is a need. It can burn plants quickly. So if you've got them out just in open raised beds or whatever, you're gonna need something. There are some plants that just love the intense heat. Peppers actually love intense heat. They're not so happy with super intense sun. Their leaves can burn just like anything else. So I go with the inside because, if you think about my vents open up like this, and I also have my solar fans, if I tried to put shade cloth on the outside, it's going to cover up my fans and my vents. If it was even my little greenhouse, my vents open like this. Then I have to find a way to strap this around on the outside, so when the storms come in or the wind blows, it doesn't blow off. It's not winging around. It's not hitting it and damaging your greenhouses or your hoop house. So I cover everything on the inside. Also, your shade cloth will last 300 times longer than it would if it was on the outside of your greenhouses or your hoop houses. Just because, unless you water the top of your greenhouse or your hoop house, it'll get moisture and stuff like that, but it's not getting wet all the time with every storm. If you don't take it off during the winter, doesn't have snow sitting on it. So it's all understanding your microclimate. Again, if you're south facing, so let's say, I'm just going to move this around. Don't pay attention to the other ones. If you're south facing, then this would be north. I'm just going to put it over this. Your greenhouse, especially if you don't have a hill like I do, is going to be getting, or your hoop house, tons of sun and heat. Thus, I still wouldn't worry about covering the ends so much, but you really have to concentrate on the top of that to keep that cool. Now, if you have a glass greenhouse, you might have a door. Most people will have windows with screens on it. Just keep in mind, teeny tiny screens, you may not get the pollinators in. So you got to think about things that have to be pollinated. Let's say you're growing squash in there, which really has to be pollinated. Yeah, you can go out there and, cut off the male flower and pollinate your female flowers. But I don't have time to do all that. So you want to make sure you can at least get some way for those pollinators to get in, be it doors being open on the end, and maybe you close them at night so the deer can't come in. That's fine. I leave the ends of my doors on my greenhouses are open, but I have to put, so they're both sliders, but they don't slide all the way to the end. So I have we basically made it. It's like a screen that fits against it, and I just use something to hold it against the side of the greenhouse. And for the little greenhouse, because it's not as tall, that's usually fine. I don't have to worry about it. But we found out very early on when we had the big greenhouse, we had this little screen. I left it open all night, and a deer jumped in because it could see both sides. So now we have just it's a taping thing. I just use magnets to hold it on either side of the plastic. They're just stronger magnets. And we just run that across, because if they can't see up and over it to get in, they're not going to jump in. Oh, gosh, what else can I tell you? Learning your microclimate. Now, if you have, let's say, a row cover, you know, so you have let's say a 3x8 bed, and you just have like a row cover. You still need to protect plants from the shade. The hardest thing to do is to protect things that grow really tall, like tomatoes, because you can't move them around a lot. So you kind of have to build the structure to handle how tall they are. And that could be even, maybe they're next to the side of your house in pots. You may need to just hook something up onto the house, stretch it down here, but then you have the tallest part where your shade's coming from. But I'm just going to refer back to the video that I just posted not long ago. You also have to consider the hail. So think about that as you're trying to decide how to best to do your garden. It may be better for you, especially if you're on a deck, to only grow determinate tomatoes because they don't get as tall. There's several out there that are wonderful in flavor and everything like that. My tomatoes, if I don't end up topping them, will hit something like a black crim or oh God, I don't even remember the rest of them. Cherokee purple. Those ones, a lot of people like growing them up here, and they'll end up growing out my vents if I let them. Usually I top them before that, because by the time it's that tall, I'm not going to get anything but a little tiny tomato on there, little green tomato that's not worth ripening. So at some point in time, you have to say, okay, no taller, you top the top. You pull a lot of the suckers off, in between, but, I don't anymore let it grow way too tall. And it's easier for me when I can still stand on a step stool to cut that main stem, because then it's not going to get any taller. But you also have to think about, especially with plants like that, how are you going to support them? That upper area. I use bamboo poles and things like that, but just keep that in mind. Again, I choose 50% shade block. Since I moved just to this, at first I just started with, and I didn't know any better. I just started with, whatever was cheap, and like a 20% is going to be cheaper than a 50%, but now I'm at 50%. I haven't gone up from there. If you have electricity, you want to run fans, that helps getting the heat out. But again, anytime you use anything that you have to pay money for, like electricity, then the price of your harvest is more. So, Rechargeable fans, I mean, you still have to recharge them. The solar fans I love. But you basically get the sun from the top versus the side. So it's really not, unless you get really good sun on a side, it's not worth putting a solar fan there, because it's not, as soon as there's not a lot of sun hitting that panel, it's not going to go off. My solar fans have a temp control, and I kick it off. I think we have it set at about 78 when they start running, if there's sun. Obviously, if it's over 78 and it's dark, they're not going to run. There's no battery backup. There's no nothing. Hope this makes sense. This weekend's supposed to be beautiful, and it's supposed to start getting hot. And I know we could get more storms, so that's why I wanted to try and get the 2 videos that I did today done to explain a little more, because we're still cold enough. We still don't have a ton of plants outside, if any, so that you can start thinking about what you want to do as it gets moving even more into May and stuff like that. A lot of this, like the shade cloth and stuff like that, starts selling out. This one happens to say made in China. With the tariffs, we're going to quit seeing a lot of this stuff. So, until they get that all figured out. That's neither here nor there, but I'm just giving a little bit of a heads up. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Have a good weekend. Happy gardening.